Hello, welcome to Macro Talk 2. It's Thursday, October the 23rd, 2025, and today more myxomycetes. And I see we've got quite a crowd here, some big names too. Let me see, Susan's here. I was just getting ready to mention your name, Susan. Also Angie Wallace. Stuart Woods was here on Tuesday, which was wonderful. And Roy Walker is here, Harold is here, Graham is here, our guest judge for the competition this month. Be talking about that in a minute too. But first, Saturday, 10 until noon. We have a Zoom. Those of you who are members of Patreon, do try to come. It'll be fun. It always is. Looking forward to that. Saturday at 12:30 until 2, Tangent, with Larry and myself. It's a 3D modeling, Fusion 360 get-together chat, opportunity to learn about CAD and CAM. Is it CAM? Yes, it is. Only 1 week left in the competition. It's product photography this month. Your challenge was to create a hero product shot, a really appealing shot of some product, anything you want to put your hands on, take a picture of it and we'll call it your product. And yeah, make it look desirable, and you may well win. Put your entry in soon though, because product shots are not hard to shoot. Well, they are hard to shoot actually, is what I meant to say, and it'll take longer than you think. Okay, any requests or recommendations for live stream topics, please put them in the chat now, and I will get to them in the next couple of weeks. Let me see, huge thanks to Alistair, Amy and Bud for doing the bouncer duties at these get-togethers. Without them, I could never keep up with everything, so thank you so much for doing that. Yeah, thank you all also to all my Patreon folks. I really do appreciate you immensely. Let me see, if you're visiting for the first time, welcome. Make yourself at home, and feel free to come back anytime you like. We're here for Macro Talk on Tuesdays at 8 p.m. Central Time, and Macro Talk 2, this thing, on Thursdays at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And yeah, I'm also doing what, 2 Zooms a month, 2 after stacks a month, 2 tangents, no, 1 tangent and 1 crystal art. That's a lot of programming, so we're doing something almost every day. So make yourself at home, as I say. You'll find something you like, I'm sure. Let me see, if that doesn't make you think that supporting this channel through Patreon wouldn't be a good idea, then I don't know what would. If you have any interest at all in helping keeping this channel going, for a small monthly contribution, you will do just that, and I will be so grateful. You can find my channel over on Patreon at www.patreon.com/AlanWallsPhotography, and that's it. That will take you to my channel, and they will explain to you how they'll take your money from you and give some of it to me. Welcome, Angie. I'm so glad to see you here, and I'm so glad to see that you're doing slime molds right now. Slime molds are captivating. I'm going to give you my ideas on why they're so addictive once you start looking at these things. And first of all, before we get started, I'm going to explain myself, give you a little background as to why I am not out in the woods right now as was planned. Hang on. Usually when my phone goes off during a live stream, it means mic delay is bad. Okay, I will try to fix that. Is that the case for everybody? Muffled. Okay, that is problematic. Let me try something. Is the sound any better now? Probably not. Let me see. Give me just a couple of seconds, guys, and I will try to hook up another microphone, is what I'll do. You look at this book in the meantime. I was going to talk about this this week, but I'll talk about it another time when I've got more time. There you go. That's the chapters in the book. while I find a microphone. Hold on. This is exactly the kind of thing I don't want to be doing during a live stream. But all right, my cables have gone missing. Sound is great in Norway. Sound is good. Great here in the UK. Sound is okay. Okay, all right, I'm putting the other microphone down. It must it must be a local bandwidth thing. I do apologize for that, guys. For those of you who are having a problem, I've been having a devil of a time getting an audio system that isn't going to cost an arm and a leg, and just don't have the money to invest in it right now. But anyway, I thought we were doing a little bit better, but I will look into this again today and see if we can improve it. The plan was I was going to talk about finding and harvesting myxomycetes, and photographing them, of course, in the field on Tuesday, which we did. I talked about the way I do it and some of the equipment I use, and showed off a few new products that had been given to me or lent to me to demonstrate how they are used when looking for myxos. Today the plan was I was going to actually be out in the woods locally, and I was just going to show you my own personal workflow when I'm out looking for these things, what I do, most of which, by the way, I should hasten to add, I learned from my friend Alison Pollock, who's one of the world's leading Myxo photographers, and truly an inspirational character. And I learned most of what I know from her, but I've learned a few things of my own since then, and I wanted to show you how I do it. When I asked Chat GPT to help me set up the equipment, give me the details on how to get everything set up for a live stream over the cellular network, she just laughed and said, that's absurd, don't even try it. And yeah, that put me off, so I decided not to. I did try on Tuesday to record a video segment that I was going to play during this session, and it was too windy. You couldn't hear anything I was saying. It was howling and raining and cold. I did bring back what I thought was a great selection of myxos from leaf litter that I had found by crawling around in the woods. And of course, when I looked at everything under the microscope, there was nothing there. Nothing to photograph, just a bunch of leaves. So yeah, it all fell apart, as often happens with my live video attempts. So what I decided to do was instead come on and talk to you about the workflow for photographing slime molds in the studio, because it involves some additional steps. It's not easy to do. In fact, none of this is easy to do, whether you're photographing in the field or in the studio. There are lots of things that are different than, say, insect photography. Very interestingly, while all of this was going on, and kind of what got me thinking about doing this week was last week during one of our get-together meetings, I was asked by a friend, Graham, if I had ever heard of this photographer. He's a myxomycetes photographer like Alison, and I had never heard of him. His name was Kutub, I believe it's pronounced, Kutub Udin. Yeah, it's a tricky name. He's from Bangladesh, and no, I'd never heard of him. But I was given a couple of links, and I went and looked at his work, and I'm going to show you some of his work in just a second. And I was completely flabbergasted by how good this guy's work was. Honestly, it looked like the man had taken his inspiration as well as his training from Alison. He has a very similar aesthetic, and his photographs are quite remarkable and beautifully done. If that wasn't enough, I also discovered after getting in touch with him that he lives just outside of the town that I grew up in the south of England. What are the chances of that happening? It was quite remarkable, and I am hoping to have him on the program here in a few weeks to talk to us about his photography and tell us how he does it, how he gets these wonderful pictures. In the process of talking to Alison about him, Alison told me the following story, which I thought was absolutely completed the circle here. She knows Kutub, of course, because the Slime World photography circle is quite tight, and in her discussions with him, he shared with her that he had never really thought much about slime mold photography until he saw one thing on the internet that completely changed that for him, and that was my interview with Alison and Rick several years ago. Rick Littlefield and Alison Pollock and I talked about slime mold photography. It was, I thought, a very good interview, and now we know it inspired some people to be great photographers, really great photographers. Let me show you a couple of his pictures. This is important because I'm going to be talking about what you need to do to take pictures like this, because it's just not an easy thing to do. So let me see if I can, I'm going to take you to his Flickr page, because that's public and I can show you this without getting in trouble, I think. I do hope anyway. So this is Kutub Uddin's page, and this is some of his work. He has a real gift for composition, as I'm sure you can see. I don't know how much of this is shot in the studio or how much of it is shot outside. It doesn't really matter. We'll talk about that in a bit. But I'm sure that you can see Alison's aesthetic all over these pictures. The way he lays out his subjects and captures these mesmerizing images of slime molds. I just love some of these. I spent almost an hour last night with Rick Littlefield going through these. That's where I'm from, by the way. Sussex, fungi photography. Yep. And he was as stunned and amazed by them as I was, which is always nice. I love this photograph too. Absolutely gorgeous. These are some of the most exciting organisms to photograph. And why do you think that is? Why do you think that these are so captivating for photographers to take on as such a challenging hobby? Rick thought these looked like a collection of teeth, which they do actually. Aren't these lovely? Beautiful, beautiful photographs. Anyway, why do you think they are so appealing? I think that it epitomizes, oh look, a springtail. It epitomizes why we are attracted to macro photography in the first place. Lamproderma scintillans right there, I think. That's the one I was looking for anyway. I know where that is. That's in Sussex too. Anyhow, there are several reasons. I think that for most of us, macro photography is exciting because we are taking photographs of things that people don't normally see. And even observant people know what a lot of insects look like. So there is some truth to that, but not as much as I think we would sometimes like. This, however, these creatures, they're not animals and they're not fungi, they're not plants. They're in their own little group, kind of like us. And yeah, they're magically different. And they're too small to see most of the time with your eye. With a powerful magnifying glass, you can begin to make out the shapes. But even with a magnifying glass, you really can't see the color and the texture and the complexity of them. So quite a remarkable page. I urge you to go to his website and look at some of his other images there, and read about them as well, because he's worth knowing about, and I look forward to having him on the program. But other reasons that this is such an appealing topic for macro photographers is how weird they are, and what a great opportunity this is for us to chronicle and record the weirdness of these organisms. They spend most of their life as a big single-celled multi-nucleate amoeba, basically a big blob of slime that crawls across the ground. And I'm going to be awfully generalized here because they have many different life behaviors. They're not all the same. There are different types of slime mold, and I'm not going to get into all of that, the biology of them, except to say that they are not fungi and they're not animals. They behave in their own way. Generally speaking, what happens is that this slime mold crawls around for most of the organism's life until they end up in a stressful situation. Lacking food is the most common cause, at which point this massive amoeba splits up into individual cells that then cooperate with one another to create these fruiting bodies, which consist of a stalk in most cases with a blob of jelly at the end, which is actually a fine reticulum of support fibers into which other cells turn into spores. So it's like the whole organism splits up into a population that then sacrifices some of its members in order to make spores out of the rest of them. And then the spores sit there until something happens, either a raindrop hits it, or it gets eaten by a bird, or something happens to break open that fruiting body, and the spores are dispersed, usually by the wind. And they can go anywhere, everywhere. And that's one of the coolest things about these organisms, is their spores literally end up everywhere. If you ask a scientist, where do slime molds live? It's everywhere. And almost every species lives almost everywhere. As I talked about on Tuesday, one of the primary indicators of how common a given slime mold is in a given geographic area is how many people are studying that slime mold in that geographic area, because that will cause the population to shoot up. In fact, they're probably equally common everywhere, and it just depends on who's looking for them as to whether or not they're recognized as being in that geographic area. Now, certain slime molds have certain different behaviors. There are some that only live in tree bark. There are others that live in the soil. There are some very suspect slime molds that only live on dung, which doesn't sound like a particularly happy life for a slime mold. And there are others that just live on leaf litter. And the one I am most interested in, the one I have spent more time looking for, is that Lamproderma scintillans, the one that's shot. Well, Lamproderma means shiny or shimmering skin. No, that's not what the derma means. I think it's something like that though. And scintillans means shimmering. So there you go. Or scintillating actually. So that's exactly what these things are. They're beautifully colored in blues and greens, and they're metallic looking. One of Alison's best ever pictures was the pair of Lamproderma scintillans that were wound around one another at the stem. Lovely picture, absolutely lovely. And I so want to find one of those to photograph, and apparently they're here. You just have to dig through a lot of leaf litter to find them. And yeah, no luck yesterday. So that's what they are. That's what a slime mold is. They're everywhere, but nobody knows about them. That's what I find so appealing. It's a lot like my crystal photography. It's it's going on everywhere around you. These crystals are forming, and nobody knows that it's happening or what they look like. Same with these gorgeous organisms, and they are so varied and so exciting to look at. And I think that's what makes it something worth photographing for us. Now, they're technically challenging to photograph because they're so very small, and it's really only slightly easier to do in the studio than it is to do say an insect. Harder to do than an insect because they're so teeny tiny. Getting them composed and getting your camera even pointed at the right part of the substrate to see the slime mold can be very difficult. I'm going to talk about that and give you some tips on how to do that in just a second. Oftentimes, even the biggest of the slime molds can be hard to see, and the little ones, especially when they're occurring in just one or two fruiting bodies on the edge of a leaf, it can be a devil to get positioned and ready to photograph. Also, of course, I said most of the time these things are living in a state of active flux. They are turning from a plasmodium, the large amoeba-like thing, into multiple fruiting bodies, which are then drying out and bursting and releasing their spores. To photograph something that is undergoing rapid change like that, you need to do several things. You need to make sure that you're keeping the environment exactly what the organism needs so that it doesn't too rapidly dehydrate or go through a change that's going to change its morphology or shape. So we need to be able to photograph these things in a relatively narrow window while we have the opportunity. Some of the slime molds are extraordinarily difficult to photograph because of their surface characteristics. Obviously, Mr. Udine likes to photograph a lot of these organisms while they're wet, which does make them really appealing to look at. But of course, it also makes them highly reflective. So you need to have quite a bit of skill in lighting and diffusing light in order to get these organisms looking their best. We'll talk about that in just a second. But I don't know of many people who photograph the plasmodial slime molds in the studio. I mean, that's something that people will do when they come across them in the field. But they're oftentimes not particularly attractive. One of the most common ones in the south is called dog's vomit, and there's another one got to do with wolf's something or other. Yeah, I can't remember what that one is, but they all look like big blobs of slime, or in the case of the yellow one, like dog's vomit on the ground. So probably not a great thing to photograph, though I do remember one of the most amazing video clips that my friend Mr. Axford in Australia has done with slime molds was of one of these plasmodia moving through a scene. Quite remarkable. They can move up to 1.5 millimeters in a minute. Is that right? Yeah, in a minute. That's pretty fast. That's fast enough to actually see with your naked eye. So other things that we'll be talking about is how to set up the lighting, contrast, the background, and making these fruiting bodies really stand out. We'll also talk about depth of field, focus stacking, and how to keep these specimens alive. That's all super important. Let's talk first about preparing the specimen and the specific problems you have and how to deal with them. As you can see from the photographs, many of these organisms or groups of organisms are incredibly delicate. They have a minute sleeve. Let me grab a couple of other pictures. These ones are mine, so they will be depressingly mundane after looking at these pictures. I wish I'd thought to talk to Alison about showing some of her work, but I didn't have a chance today. So instead, here's some Here's some slime molds I can show you. Let me switch screens, and then we'll be in good shape. So when you find these things, they are frequently, well, sometimes you'll find them in vast mats where they cover the undersurface of a log, and there are tens of thousands of fruiting bodies. Well, that's not too big of a problem. You can take a piece of bark that has several hundred of them on it and put it in a small box, which you have to pack in there very, very carefully so that it can't knock against the surface with the fruiting bodies on it, and carefully take it back to your studio and fish it out of the box. If you're like me and your studio is 10 minutes away from where you're looking for these things, that's one thing that will certainly help. If you're hours away from your studio, like Alison is when she's off doing her hunts in the woods, then yeah, you need to be much more careful in how you package these things for travel, because they are delicate. And in this case, when I found these were not ones I grew. Some of these I grew on bark myself, but others I found, and this was one of the ones I found. And the yellow surface, the covering of the sporangium, was intact when I found them, but not so by the time I photographed them. They had already started to drop spores, and yeah, changed quite rapidly. Subsequent photographs of these show them drooping further and further. They are somewhere between extraordinarily difficult to impossible to clean, and I'm pretty careful about cleaning, and I do clean some very delicate subjects. I've given up trying to clean these. Even touching the sporangium with a hair of a paintbrush, a fine soft paintbrush, will knock off the surface covering and expose the spores for a lot of species. So I am very careful about avoiding that if possible. I think these are Physarum. I'm not actually sure. I should have checked. I ran out of time today, but or a Kyria or something like that. But yeah, this is another piece of bark with a small grouping, and you can see that they are terribly delicate. Now, what Alison does is she keeps them in little cardboard boxes, and in a place they can't be disturbed. And she says they will exist in this state, dried, for a long time. I've had relatively good luck keeping them intact. Once I get them home safe, I think I've still got this piece of bark, and they're still on there. So yeah, it can be done. But you do have to be very, very careful. I usually put a dampened piece of filter paper in the little plastic box with each of my specimens. Another thing that I do, by the way, just in case you're interested, when I go out looking for slime molds and I find a slime mold on a piece of bark, I use a very sharp razor blade type knife to take a sliver of the bark with the sporangia on it, and that will be my specimen. But I also take another sliver or several slivers from the same tree, and I'll put them in a terrarium type setting where they'll be kept in ideal conditions for the development of the fruiting bodies, in case there are any spores in the bark that come to life and decide they want to make a sporangium. And I've had some pieces of bark that just have fruiting bodies pop up on them after sometimes after as little as a day, sometimes a month later. So they're bizarre, but very beautiful. Okay, so that's the preparation, getting the subject physically ready. I would not even blow an air blower on these things. You can try it one time if you want to see why you shouldn't be doing it. And I suppose some of them that don't release their spores because they dry out. I suppose there are some that you can gently blow and have them clean off a little bit. Certainly some of the really thick shafted ones can probably stand up to it, but most of the ones that I find around here will not do well with being touched or blown with air. Once I get back to the studio and I have my specimens lined up and I know what I want to photograph, I have to think about the physical form and which of these structures are going to physically change shape or change their position quickest. Now, these kind of organisms here with the thin stems, as these stems dry out in the studio, or maybe it's as they warm up or cool down, I'm not exactly sure, they will tend to bend, and it can happen quite rapidly. So that I've learned that the thinner the stem on the sporangium, the more quickly I need to get that specimen ready and photographed. Others that have a very thick base and they can be absolutely unchanging for days or weeks, and I'm in much less of a hurry to photograph them. But it's definitely worth looking at. Now, every now and again I'll have one that it's absolutely beautiful, but I'm going to need more time to photograph it. I found that by using a little water bottle cap, a plastic cap, I was trying to find one around here. Well, here's one, hang on. I take a short piece of cotton string and a little tiny cap of water, which I'll put kind of underneath the stage that I'm mounting the specimen on, and I will put the piece of string up and wrap it around the bark at the base of the sporangium. It seems to keep them hydrated a little bit. I don't know how they get the water up in there, but yeah, they seem to last longer that way when I've got them sitting on under the lights for a fair amount of time. Certainly they seem to sag less aggressively. So that's one thing that you can think of. Then you need to consider, let's say you've got a piece of bark and you've got 100 sporangia or 1,000 sporangia on it. What do you want the photograph to say? What are you going to try to do? Now, you look at the pictures of Alison or Kutub, and you can see here that these are obviously very much thought out images. They're planned and designed around the way one or two or three of these sporangia interact. I have precious few images that rise to the level of being interesting in terms of how the elements are arranged together, because I just haven't found enough of them to be able to do this. But there is one that I rather like. It's this one, which reminded me of it's a little crazy, but bear with me. This looked like a little child having a temper tantrum. Oh, you can't see it. There you go. There it is. This sporangium looked like a little child hunched over with his fists balled and crying with 2 tears and his mouth all scrunched up. This looked like an angry father, and this looked like a mother with her nose in the air. Now, put that down to my upbringing if you must, but I saw that scene in these 3 sporangia, so that's how I decided to line this image up this way. I could have shot it from any angle I wanted, but this seemed to tell a story that was a bit more approachable, and that is what your task is when you're faced with a piece of substrate that has a lot of organisms, a lot of fruiting bodies on it. How do you want the picture to look? Do you want to shoot it from low down like I did here with the subjects, at least the 2 adult subjects in the back, taller than the the child a subject in the front. So this was both an angle and a direction that I had to select to make this work for the way I saw the picture. And you just have to look at any of Alison's pictures to see the story that she's telling, and how the composition is so vital in doing that. So coming up with a way to show the cleanest and most intact part of the sporangium you can, in a way that gives a meaningful composition that tells a story, is the next part. After that, you have to ask the question about how you're going to photograph this thing in terms of depth of field, and are you going to focus stack this, or are you going to make this a single shot? Seldom will you ever do single shot photography of slime molds. Most slime molds are between 300 and 600 microns in depth across the biggest part of their sporangium. That's way more depth than you're going to be able to get with, say, a 10 times microscope objective. A 10x microscope objective with a numeric aperture of about 0.28 will give you a depth of field of something like 7 to 12 microns in both directions, translating to a step length of about 8 microns to be safe, with enough overlap. So you're talking about needing a bunch of shots, maybe over 100, maybe over 200. So this picture, because of the fact that there was a lot of depth that I wanted to get in, because these sporangia are separated by several millimeters, it was hundreds and hundreds of frames to get this completely in the scene. Though I think I did use a 5 times objective, so I was able to get a few less shots. Which reminds me, sometimes it's okay to let a little bit of the resolution go. If you have an objective that has a slightly lower numeric aperture, it's going to have a slightly greater depth of field, and you can get away with slightly fewer photographs, like the 10x CFI plan from Nikon, a lovely achromatic lens, as opposed to the apochromatic Mitutoyo, but you can get away with quite a few less shots with that. So figuring out the magnification you want to use, how far back you want to be, how you want the organisms arranged in the scene, is all part of the process. But so is ensuring that the substrate that you're photographing them on is not too distracting. Now, this is something I'm remiss with. You look at Alison's work, and certainly when you look at Katoob's work, he uses a very basic foreground, a very simple, smooth, often out of focus foreground and background that don't detract at all from the real hero of the image, the sporangium. And that's important depending on the aesthetic you're going for, but I think it's wonderful. It concentrates all the viewer's energy on the subject. The background, making decisions about what color do you want the background to be. Oftentimes I will choose a color that complements what we're seeing in the foreground, and I will often light the background but only dimly. So I will often put the background as a colored sheet of foam quite far behind the subject with a very low power light on it. The next question you have to ask is, how are you going to light the subject? And that is a topic all of its own. I mean, it would take, well, that's really the most important part of getting a successful photograph, is how you're going to light it. Now, I've been a flash photographer, flash macro photographer for many years. Only recently, since acquiring the mirrorless Z8 Nikon camera that I use, have I been able to switch to continuous light. There are really strong arguments for using continuous light to photograph these things. As I said, they have a tendency to move. They also have a tendency to vibrate because they're on stalks, which is a little bit of a different problem. But if they are moving and you're trying to stack them, that's a bad thing. I want to get that stack done as quickly as possible. With a mirrorless camera and good quality multiple LED light sources that are well matched, I can rip through the acquisition of the photographs in minutes. Whereas if I'm using a mirrored camera, I have to wait for the mirror slap to calm down and the flashes to recharge, and it's a much more drawn out process. It can take some number of seconds, 20 or 30 seconds between each shot to get the same quality of image. So thinking about that is worthwhile, though there are definitely sometimes I would want to use the slower method if I could, because of some of the other image considerations. But yeah, so you have to think about that. Let me see, there are some other special considerations. You may want to, for example, consider time-lapse if you want to actually record the sporangia releasing its spores, for example. If you put it in a stressful environment without any moisture, for example, some of those conditions could cause a sporangium to split open, and if you were capturing a shot every minute or two, you could capture that in a time-lapse sequence. But most of the time what you're going to want to do is prevent your area from drying out. Now in this case I try to keep everything as close to closed off as possible, so I can keep a high humidity environment for these things. They seem to be most stable when I can do that. I even used a humidifier at one point in the studio. It kind of made everything a bit wet, so I stopped doing it. But there's probably other ways that are less dangerous. But yeah, think about that. And that's most of it. Post-processing is important too, though. You need to think about how you're going to process these stacks, because the different types of slime molds are going to respond very differently to the way you stack the images. Images that are already highly contrasty, that have a lot of reflection, are going to be less successfully stacked using like a pyramid algorithm, the PMAX algorithm in Zerine, for example. It will force the contrast a little bit more aggressively, and you can end up with some pretty unattractive end results if you're just using PMAX alone. I found that most of these, except for the empty ones, except for the plasmodia that have lost their spores and are just a skeleton of the structural material, in that case a PMAX image would be a better choice, because you can resolve all of the detail in retouching. But for something smooth like, let me see if I can find another one. I don't have that many good examples, but I can maybe find one or two. Yeah, here's one that's really quite smooth and would probably be best served with a DMAP treatment, because you don't have a lot of crossing detail. Having the DMAP would add contrast without adding any useful detail, and the DMAP would allow you to hang on to the subtle colors and the surface textures a little bit more successfully. So know what you're going to do, and also think about how you plan to retouch the photographs, and what you want to use as a base for retouching, and what you want to use as a retouch source for detail. Usually that would be DMAP as the base, and PMAX as the source. But again, that's another entirely different subject. I would urge you, in most cases, to be very, very cautious about over sharpening these. Usually, I forgot to show you the picture again, didn't I? I'm terrible about that. If you over sharpen these, they tend to look it because there's nothing else to distract the viewer. They're looking right at the subject and nothing else. So over sharpening can make them look a bit jangly, in my opinion. Something else you want to be careful with is color, and I think that subtlety is useful. I'm going to show you a couple of unsuccessful pictures. No, I'm not. I'm not going to show you that one. That's terrible. Let me show you a slightly less unsuccessful one. Here's one that I had the devil of a time lighting. I'm not even sure it's a slime mold, to be honest. It might be a mushroom, but it's only a millimeter tall, and it looked like a slime mold to me, but it was pitch black. In fact, it was blacker than the bark it was on. That was quite difficult to light, but it was also difficult to process. Very interesting. Don't actually know what that is, but yeah, it's one of those things you find when you're snooping around trees looking for slime molds. That's a little bit more the kind of thing. Color it's very easy to go overboard and oversaturate these things, because the colors are either subtle or they're really striking, and either way it kind of makes you want to push them a little bit. But I would avoid it. They do look very unnatural when you oversaturate them. My goodness, we're running out of time. So you can see from not from my pictures, but from the examples I showed you earlier on, that there is a wonderful opportunity to surprise and delight the viewer who's looking at your pictures, because they're just not used to seeing these. This is a truly outlandish thing to discover that lives on the planet, that lives everywhere on the planet. You can tell this by how many photographers will eventually, after looking at enough of these pictures, will say, I think I would want to go out and look for some of these. And yeah, I was not enthusiastic the first time I went out and looked. I really did it just so that I could tell Alison that I had made the effort. And I did make the effort, and I became immediately hooked into the process, because it is quite remarkable how rewarding it is to find one of these things, and then to find another, and then to realize that they really are everywhere if you slow down, use a good magnifying glass, take your time and look at every single leaf in your little patch that you've chosen to look at. That's what I do, by the way. I talked about this a bit on Tuesday, but when I go out and I look around at the area that I'm in, I'll find some area that I think probably has not had its leaf litter disturbed, because it looks like it hadn't had an animal digging around in there, or no people have walked over there. And I will find an area that's fairly flat. I take a bucket with me to sit on, because I'm not limber enough to get on the ground and expect to ever get up again. So I sit on the bucket and I start going through the leaves, deeper and deeper into the litter, until I start seeing things that look promising. And then I'll focus on that depth, and you just have to pick up every leaf and look at it front and back and go over it with a magnifying glass. And you'll be amazed when you find these things. If you take the magnifying glass away and just look at the leaf, they'll vanish again. They are that small. Some of them are, anyway. So finding them and then photographing them can be amazingly satisfying. Somebody asked me the other day, how do you frame this image? How do you find the subject with your camera, especially if you're using a mirrorless camera? Because I used to use, when I was using a DSLR, I'd use a little thing that I created that clipped onto the eyepiece of my DSLR and allowed me to shine a laser beam off the mirrors and straight through the center of the lens. And by doing that, I would have a little tiny red dot on the subject, on the stage where I was trying to position the piece of substrate or whatever. And I could literally aim the red dot at the area of the thing that the slime molds are on, and then I could confirm it through the camera and go ahead and set my shot up. You can't do that, obviously, with a mirrorless camera, because the laser's going into a television screen. It's not going through the camera. And it is much more difficult to do. But it is not impossible to do. And I use a thing, not every time, because I'm pretty good at doing it just by feel, but earlier on, I like to use a map pin. A map pin is it's a short pin with a ball on it, a colored ball. You probably knew what a map pin was without me doing it. That's a map pin. So I would take one of these and stick it in the part of the bark or the leaf litter, whatever it was I had set up. Usually if it was leaf litter, it would be on a piece of blue tack. And I'd stick the pin near, but not into the area of interest. I would always stick it either at 12 o'clock or at 9 o'clock, relative to the area I'm interested in. Then I'd go back to the camera, I'd shine a bright light on the map pin, and then I would scan back and forth using one of these XYZ, what am I trying to say, a tripod head, a three-dimensional tripod head. My Benro is the one I use. That way I can go back and forth and up and down in a grid pattern until I found the pin head. When I found that, I knew that my subject was a little bit to the right. I'd move the camera a little bit to the right, focus, and there it was. So even with fairly high magnification, that was a good way to do it. It worked for me. Now I just kind of pointed there and figure it out, but it can be difficult. So where was I when I got distracted and mentioned that? The challenges, the specific challenges, in addition to finding the subject on your stage, can be finding the subject in nature. I go out to find slime molds quite often, and sometimes with a camera, sometimes not. Sometimes I'll just go out with my collection kit, my knives and little containers, and I will hunt for hours without finding a single fruiting body. And other times I'll go out and I'll get bunches of them. You have to be in the right frame of mind. You can't go out there in a hurry, and you shouldn't go out there in conditions that are unlikely to yield fruiting bodies. The reason Thursday, today, was such a promising day was we had 3 days of rain 3 days ago, and the ground is still moist, but the rains have stopped. This is probably a pretty good time. It's also early fall. Late summer, early fall is one of the best times to find many species. Now, understand that there are species that live in snowbanks in Alaska that you can find in January. I get that. I understand that. When I go out, I'm less interested in going after a particular species as I am in finding some slime molds. Now, I do tend to favor leaf litter because the molds I most want to find are more commonly found in leaf litter, they say. So I will focus my attention more on that. But there's an argument even for bringing back a collection of leaf litter, just a bucket full of the stuff. Not a bucket, because you'll never look through it all, but bring a specimen back and sort through it in the comfort of your own home. I've often thought about doing that, though I never actually have. I might do that this afternoon. But yeah, it's definitely not something that you can count on. Planning to do a video on a successful slime mold hunt before you actually go out and look for them, is pretty stupid, which is why I think I got so much grief from Chat GPT this week. Keeping the sporangia fit and healthy and looking good in the studio is really difficult. You've just got to be fast and have a plan, and do all the things I mentioned about trying to keep them well hydrated. Anytime you're trying to photograph something that is too small for you to see is going to be problematic, and you have to practice your skills of finding these things through the camera and getting set up for the picture. Oftentimes they're going to be very subtly colored, they're going to be relatively low in contrast, and some parts of them may be transparent, other parts might be highly reflective. So you need to be ready to use cross polarization. You need to be ready to add just a single polarizing filter. You need to be ready to use complicated diffusion techniques to make sure that no direct light is bouncing back off the wet surface of one of these sporangia into your lens. Depth of field, knowing roughly how big these things are so that you can get in your head how many images you're going to need. Remember, when in doubt, take more pictures with shorter steps. It's always safer to do that. If you have focus banding on these images, it will be very apparent and it won't look good. If you're using lenses, of course, this goes without saying, use the lens at its sweet spot, f5.6 or whatever that might be. Do not shoot with a high f number to get depth of field. It will ruin the picture from diffraction. I think that's everything. It's everything, because we're pretty much out of time, and I want to see if there are any questions. I didn't cover nearly as much as I wanted to. I actually had 2 more pages of notes, and I gathered a whole series of interesting things about myxomycetes lore that I will bring up on. I'll talk about them in Patreon on Saturday when we have our Zoom meeting, because there's some fun stuff about myxos that you might not know. But anyway, let me see. Has everybody gone home already? It is the beginning of the weekend. Well, for me it is, because Friday's the only day I don't do live streams. Did you know that? Well, it seems to be anyway. I cannot find. There it is. There it is. Best tool for looking for myxos is... Oh, Alison is here. Greetings, Alison. Very few myxos fluoresce, says Alison, and that's probably therefore true. I'm going to have to read through this. I didn't realize you were there. Don't forget, UK European clocks changed this weekend, so Alan's live streams will be an hour earlier next week. It's the only week, I think, that happens, and our clocks catch up with you the following week. I'm so glad to see Alison here. Alison, thank you for getting in touch, and it's so good to see you out and about and doing this stuff. We're all excited to have you as our chief slime mold mentor and inspiration. Let me see. A springtail in a stack can make a great photo. Yes, it can indeed. I absolutely love those photobombed slime mold pictures with globular springtails sitting on top of one of them. Well, let me see. We are done, so I'm going to take my leave. Thank you everybody for coming. Thank you, Alistair, Bud, Amy, for being prodigious bouncers. And oh, Alison is going to try to make it to the Zoom Saturday. That would be wonderful. Alison, if you do, we'll probably be using the first hour to do our usual things, and then we'll devote the second hour to a discussion of myxos. So you don't have to get up quite as early if you want to do that. So we'll say 11 o'clock Central Time. We'll start doing myxo stuff on Saturday. I made that decision quite precipitously, but there you go. I'm a born leader. Guys, have a great weekend. Stay safe and be well, and I will see you either on Saturday at Presume, Saturday at Tangent, or sometime next week. Alistair, did anybody make any suggestions or recommendations? If they did, if you wouldn't mind letting me know. I saw you emailed me the other day, and I still haven't had a chance to get to it, but I will now.